Welcome back to Cossy Arsenal Podcast. My name is Cossy. Welcome back to a brand new video. This is your latest Arsenal news and transfer news. We're going to be diving into the striker situation as we approach January. A lot of stories coming up. Of course, it's the hottest topic. It's the most popular topic when it comes to Arsenal right about now. Now, of course, we have new information from David Ornstein on Victor Osimhen and also how much Arsenal are willing to spend on a striker, especially in January. Because, he says Arsenal are not going to spend a lot of money on Victor Osimhen. They're not going to spend a lot of money in January on a striker, and that leaves Victor Osimhen out because he says Arsenal really interested, like any other club, in Europe. The striker market right now is very short, and there's so many clubs interested in getting themselves a striker. However, Arsenal are not going to pay over the odds to get players like Victor Osimhen. So I'll give you an update on that one. We'll be talking about Toney. We'll be talking about, of course, the big man himself there in Ollie Watkins as well. There's a new update on Ollie Watkins. Will Arsenal eventually go for Ollie Watkins? Just sign a new deal at Aston Villa. It kind of feels like a bluff, in my opinion, but we can talk about it because this is where you get your latest around the club. Let's get this video to 300 likes. Subscribe to the podcast as well. Let's get into it. Right, let's start off with that big one from David Ornstein, who says that the next Arsenal striker could also be actually Victor Osimhen, not David Ornstein, but it could be Victor Osimhen. Arsenal interested in Victor Osimhen, according to David Ornstein, just like any other club in Europe. So he says at the moment, you look at the striker market and you don't have a lot of options, especially when you talk about the big fish in the striker pond. You have Toney, you have Ollie Watkins on the market, you have Victor Osimhen on the market as well, and Ollie Watkins has just signed a new deal, at Aston Villa. We'll talk about Ollie Watkins just in a moment. So, David Ornstein says that Arsenal, there's no doubt, Arsenal are really interested in Victor Osimhen. And if you can actually put aside all these crazy reports and all this crazy, whatever is going on, that Victor Osimhen could move to Arsenal in a swap deal with Gabriel Jesus involved, which is never going to happen in my life, and I don't think it will ever happen during the course of our livelihoods. So it looks like Osimhen is very far away from the budget, and Osimhen is very far away from what Arsenal are looking for in terms of signing a striker who is affordable and signing a striker who can actually come into the squad in January. So, Ornstein says the budget at the moment is not as stretched as what Aurélie De Laurentiis is actually asking for. Arsenal are not looking to spend 130 million, 150 million on a striker. And I think we might be right here. I think Edu, again, and Mikel Arteta could be spot on. What Arsenal have at the moment is a very good setup. We need a number 9. We need a goal scorer. We need some guy that can give us 25, 30 goals in a campaign. But I don't think that guarantees us to spend 150 million. That doesn't guarantee us to spend 130 million. If Arsenal spent 80, 70, 90, I could feel it. I could understand. But Victor Osimhen, 130, 150 million, in my opinion, is kind of still very high. Unless he can replicate what he did last campaign, this campaign. If he can go and score another 30 goals in all competitions, I'll listen. I'll be listening, and I'll be very, very eager to get him at the Emirates Stadium. Now, my problem with Victor Osimhen, again, away from David Ornstein for a moment, I think Victor Osimhen is a good striker. I think he's one of the strikers that are going to be huge in modern football. I can see him replace Karim Benzema at Real Madrid. I can see him become a huge striker. He can go to Bayern. He can go to Barcelona. He can go to Real Madrid. He can be anywhere. But my problem with Osimhen is the overhype. I think Osimhen is overrated at the moment, and I think he's being overhyped because of one or two reasons. One, I think he had a very good campaign, and every Napoli player who actually contributed to them winning the Scudetto in over 30 years deserves a massive credit, deserves a lot of credit, right? So Victor Osimhen, I'm not taking anything away from what he's done. He's a quality player, he's a good player, but I don't think he deserves the 130 million. I don't think he deserves to be the next record signing at Arsenal Football Club, in my opinion. Well, I mean, we will disagree. I know you think about Osimhen as the epitome of strikers and the epitome of young strikers at the moment. I mean, I could respect that. But I don't think Arsenal at the moment would be wisely making a decision or making a wise decision to spend 130 million upwards on Victor Osimhen. Anyway, David Onstein says that Arsenal don't want to spend that much on a striker, and I still agree with Mikel and Edu. There is a lot to deal with. There is a lot to work on. So there is that Pedro Neto deal that we are looking at. But then you've got to look at this midfield. Thomas Partey eventually is going to leave at some point in time. He's getting older and injuries are catching up with him. And the physicality of the Premier League is more demanding than ever. More minutes, more games, and so much more. You look at Jorginho, you expect him to be at Arsenal probably for one more season or even 2 more seasons. And then that's the maximum. He will eventually leave, the same as Mohamed Elneny. So Arsenal actually need 2 more midfielders because even Albert Sambilekonga is not going to be at this football club. We have already seen him. He's not going to be a successful product at Arsenal Football Club. So I would rather spend 80 million, 70 million on his number 9 and then spend 35 or 40 million on a midfielder and spend another 50 million on a winger like Pedro Neto. I think that makes more sense. Again, we've talked about Saka before and the need for rotation. We've talked about Declan Rice and Thomas Partey and why Arsenal need another midfielder. And we've always talked about a striker. So I think we need around 3 more players in the squad. Spending 130 million might not be the way to go, in my opinion, especially in 2024. But I want your thoughts there on Victor Osimhen. Should Arsenal break the bank and get Osimhen out of Napoli? Should Arsenal use that kind of conservative approach? We're not going for a lot of money. We're going for a sensible approach. We're going for a sensible sum. If it's 100 million, no. If it's less than 100 million, yeah, probably we could get Victor Osimhen. There is no doubt for me, in my mind, in my head, he's going to become a top striker. He will become like a real, top striker. But at the moment, I don't think he's there. And at the moment, I don't think he really represents the real value of 130 million pounds, 150 million pounds. I don't think he's a striker that represents that kind of value. He's not prime Harry Kane. He's not prime Karim Benzema at the moment. He is just Victor Osimhen, a guy that is scoring a couple of goals for Napoli. They're winning a couple of games as well. And he's overhyped, in my opinion. He's being overrated. And anyone who buys him for that crazy amount of money, they might be repeating and making a big mistake and repeating the Alvaro Morata mistake that we all saw Chelsea make a couple of years ago. Arsenal wanted him. Wenger was not willing to pay over the odds. Chelsea said, hey, we will pay over the odds. And what happened eventually is Chelsea made massive losses. So for me, guys, Victor Osimhen, that's the update. I'm not really the biggest fan of 130, 150 million on his head at the moment. Okay, but talking about huge amounts of money and talking about deals that could be impossible. Again, today Arsenal have been linked with a new striker, probably not very new in terms of our wish list, but new in terms of the last few weeks when we've been talking about strikers, and that name is Ollie Watkins is back again in the news. Now, I don't understand why Ollie Watkins is back in the news. Now, the story says that Arsenal are really interested in Ollie Watkins and they keep on tracking the same players, and therefore Ollie Watkins, as one of the players that Arsenal have been tracking for quite a very long period of time, we continue to be interested. I think the one thing that puts me off this deal, and why I think it's kind of a crazy one, it's a crazy story. Ollie Watkins has just signed a new long-term deal at Aston Villa. And for me, that puts you off. If he was going to go for maybe 70 million or maybe 65, signing that new deal gives Aston Villa a lot of negotiating power, a lot of power in the negotiations. We might actually have to pay over the odds for Ollie Watkins. I think if the player wanted to leave, if Ollie Watkins thought his future is far away and his future is quite farther away from Aston Villa, then he doesn't sign that new deal, right? I don't think he signs that new deal. I think he would respectively tell Aston Villa, I love the club. I think you've done well, but I've got to find my biggest step. I need to go to the next big step. I've been called up for England, and that means that the next big step is calling on to me. I think Ollie Watkins is gonna be at Aston Villa for the next 5 years, 6 years, or even or even 10 years. I don't see him as one of those players that are going to get a big move. He's a good striker. I like him. I would be happy to see Arsenal pay 70 million or probably 65 million for Ollie Watkins. He's got something very, very similar to Gabriel Jesus, that kind of pressing ability and the runs in behind. If you watch the Aston Villa, it was Aston Villa Brighton. In that game, Aston Villa clearly annihilated Brighton, and one of the reasons as to why they were able to do that were the runs of Ollie Watkins in behind, and he's got the ability to drop deep as well, pick up the ball. He's a ball player. He's he's a good team player. I like him. I really do. I like Ollie Watkins, but he's just signed a new deal. He's just signed a new deal at Aston Villa. It doesn't make any sense for Arsenal now to go, well, he signed a new deal. Now we want him. Now we want to sign him. Doesn't make any sense, guys. In my opinion, it doesn't make any sense. But still, I want to get your thoughts there. If you had two options, Osimhen or Ollie Watkins, who do you sign? Watkins is older. I think he's approaching 28. Premier League proven. He's one of those players that can score for you a couple of goals. But I've not seen the killer instinct in him to go. He's the striker that can score 30 goals at Arsenal. I've not seen that kind of instinct in him. Whether he takes penalties or not, Ivan Toney is still a much better player than Ollie Watkins, in my opinion. He's still a much better player. I think his game is all around. He's younger, and he's proven that he can actually do it on a big stage, and he has so many more attributes to his game than Ollie Watkins. Both of them are good strikers, but I would still take Ivan Toney. I would still take Toney at the moment, right? So Devin on Stain about Ivan Toney, and of course I think I saw an update on Fabrizio Romano. So let's start off with Fabrizio Romano. Romano says Arsenal clearly appreciate Ivan Toney and they will try in January. There is an agreement and there is a consensus, inside Arsenal that Ivan Toney could be the striker that is missing on the puzzle. Of course, David Onstein says that there's a look at Ivan Toney in January. Arsenal could prefer to actually take things slow, but if there is an opportunity on Ivan Toney in January, then Arsenal will actually make their move. Two stories that are very similar. Two stories that I think are kind of in tandem and a kind of related. What I think is this: I don't think Arsenal will sign Ivan Toney in January, but I think we will make our move just like we did with Declan Rice. Arsenal can start working on this deal as early as January, so that by the time we get into June or July, early June or late June, Arsenal get Ivan Toney done. Arsenal get the deal done. So it's the same thing I see with Ivan Toney. You work on the deal for 6 months. You make sure that you've convinced the player. You make sure that you've talked to Brentford early enough, and you've convinced them into selling. And then you have a picture of the price that they will want. And then in the summer, you just sign him. You'd actually just go and get the deal done. So again, appreciate it, but there is nothing like a bid is being prepared. Of course, I mean, it could change anytime. It could change in November. It could change in December. Arsenal could prepare a bid in January. Arsenal could prepare a bid in December. But at the moment, with stubborn Mikel Arteta at the wheel, I'm really struggling to see us sign a striker in January. But I think the most important information, guys, in this video is that there is a maximum price we are willing to pay, and that is going to determine who is gonna come in, right? Arsenal are not willing to pay over the odds. Arsenal are not willing to pay crazy amounts of money, and Arsenal are not willing to pay for a player they do not believe in. So if our budget is 90 million, if our budget is 80 million, that is Ivan Toney, that is Dusan Vlahovic, that is you could give me some of the strikers, we could sign for that amount. Alvaro Morata, probably. If Arsenal had their budget extended to upwards of 100 million, then we could be thinking about the likes of, Victor Osimhen. So we have a ceiling and we have a price, we have a price maxima. What we are willing to pay is very clear, and what we are not willing to pay, the region in which we will not accept to pay or buy a player, is also very, very clear. So I want to see what's going to happen with this one. Osimhen, Looks like he's appreciated, but Arsenal not really interested in paying over the odds. Talk to me in the comment box below. Let me know in the comment box below. Of those three, who do you think Arsenal should be signing? Toney, Osimhen, or Ollie Watkins, right? We'll talk more later on the Arsenal Total Access Show. See you soon.